The heavy scent of ozone and burning parchment fills the room of requirement as the cursed blue flames of fiendfare roar into monstrous serpents, tearing through towering stacks of forgotten centuries, ancient books, discarded trunks, and broken furniture accumulated by generations of students. This is not merely a battle for survival against a teenage rival or a stray dark wizard. It is the physical annihilation and painful cleansing of the founding ethos of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. To understand how the modern wizarding war was won and lost, we have to look directly at the objects left behind in the 10th century by Godric Gryffindor, Salazar Slytherin, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Helga Hufflepuff. These four physical relics were never mere historical antiques or decorative ornaments meant to gather dust in a glass case. They were loaded ideological weapons that Lord Voldemort deliberately hunted down, desecrated through unspeakable dark magic, and turned into Horcruxes to subvert the school's very soul and twist its heritage into an engine of tyranny. It all starts around 993 AD. That is when the four greatest witches and wizards of the age carved a castle out of the Scottish Highlands, creating a sanctuary for magical youth. They shared a goal to educate young magical minds and shelter them from persecution. But that unity fractured almost immediately due to philosophical disagreements. Salazar Slytherin demanded a purity test for admissions, arguing that magical blood must be guarded. He refused to teach Muggle-born students, sparking a civil war within the castle. When the other three founders rejected his extremism, Slytherin abandoned the school. Before he left, he built the Chamber of Secrets deep beneath the dungeons, sealing away a basilisk designed to purge the castle of the students he despised. Tom Riddle would later resurrect that exact ideological fracture by weaponizing the founders' personal heirlooms against the wizarding world. Let us trace this historical trajectory back to the establishment of the school, looking at the political landscape of Britain in the late 10th century. Circa 993 AD, wizardkind lived under the lethal threat of non-magical persecution. Ordinary people hunted practitioners of magic out of fear, driving wizarding families into hiding. It was within this climate of vulnerability that four individuals, Godric Gryffindor, Salazar Slytherin, Rowena Ravenclaw, and Helga Hufflepuff, formed an alliance. They envisioned an institution that would keep magical children safe from external violence and provide them with an education in the magical arts. The physical construction of Hogwarts Castle itself was a magical marvel of the medieval world, built secretly in the Scottish Highlands because it was remote and difficult for Muggles to reach. Yet the internal philosophies of the four founders pulled in different directions. Rowena Ravenclaw valued brilliant intellect and mental acuity, immortalizing her educational standard in the inscription on her diadem. Wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure. Helga Hufflepuff championed loyalty, hard work, and an egalitarian approach to admissions captured in her maxim, "I'll teach the lot and treat them just the same." Godric Gryffindor honored raw courage and chivalry, seeking out those who possessed the backbone to stand up against impossible odds. Salazar Slytherin stood apart from this inclusive ethos. His philosophy was rooted in ambition and blood purity. Slytherin's declaration, "Will teach just those whose ancestry's purest," was a demand for systemic exclusion. He distrusted Muggle-born witches and wizards, arguing that magic was an inheritance that should never be diluted. When Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, and Hufflepuff rejected his exclusionary policies, an ideological impasse crippled the school's leadership. Slytherin left the school, but not before constructing the Chamber of Secrets beneath the foundations to house a massive basilisk. This monster remained hidden for centuries, waiting for Slytherin's heir to open the chamber and purge the school of every Muggle-born student. This original schism proved that the divisions sown during the founding era would cast a shadow over every generation of magical society. Let us look closer at the first of these artifacts, the Sword of Gryffindor. Forged by goblin silversmiths to the specifications of Godric Gryffindor, this blade is cast in pure silver and encrusted with rubies along its pommel. Its power lies in its magical sentience. It does not sit idly in a display case. It actively tests those who seek it, presenting itself to a true Gryffindor in moments of life or death need via the sorting hat. The sword possesses a metallurgical appetite, absorbing substances that strengthen it, most notably the venom of a basilisk. Unlike the other founder relics, the sword resisted acquisition and dark corruption entirely. It stayed clean, it stayed good. It became the ultimate anti-Horcrux, an instrument of divine retribution forged by ancient magic to balance the scales against Voldemort's atrocities. To understand the significance of the Sword of Gryffindor, we must examine the historical relationship between wizard kind and goblin culture regarding craftsmanship and property rights. In the wizarding world, the sword is treated as an heirloom of Godric Gryffindor, purchased by the founder from King Ragnak I, the goblin silversmith of his era. However, goblin cultural tradition holds a different view. According to ancient goblin law, any object crafted by a goblin remains the permanent property of the maker unless it is explicitly paid for through the return of the item upon the original purchaser's death. Muggles and wizards, failing to respect this custom, viewed goblin-made items as purchases that transfer absolute ownership. This philosophical divide caused centuries of tension, erupting into goblin rebellions and manifesting in the way the Sword of Gryffindor operates. Despite these cultural tensions, the sword was enchanted by Gryffindor with properties that transcend metalworking. Because it was forged by goblins, it is impervious to physical damage and dirt, possessing an innate capacity to absorb any substance that makes it stronger. When Harry Potter, Ron Weasley, and Neville Longbottom face mortal danger, the sword manifests through the sorting hat, appearing wherever a brave soul requires it. During the Battle of Hogwarts, when Neville Longbottom pulls the sword from the sorting hat to decapitate Nagini, he utilizes an artifact that bridges goblin smithing with the heroic virtue of Gryffindor's legacy. Unlike the personal possessions of the other three founders, which were stolen and corrupted into vessels of dark magic, Gryffindor's sword remained uncorruptible. It is the single founder relic that Voldemort could never claim or twist to his own ends, serving as a weapon of liberation. Turn your attention instead to the items that did not stay clean. Salazar Slytherin left behind a gold locket, stamped with a serpentine S formed of green stones. Passed down through generations of his direct bloodline, the Gaunt family, this locket became one of Tom Riddle's earliest trophies. Riddle stole it from Hepzibah Smith, murdered a muggle tramp and a goblin to secure it, and tore his soul apart to anchor a piece of it inside the gold. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione hunted the Horcruxes across the countryside, this locket acted as a psychological weapon. It projected paranoia and malice straight into the minds of its wearers. It whispered doubts and turned friends against each other. It was Slytherin's ancient elitism made manifest, corrupting whoever touched it, until Ron Weasley plunged Gryffindor's sword through its cursed heart. The history of Slytherin's locket provides a harrowing window into the degeneration of a once great magical bloodline. Over centuries, the descendants of Salazar Slytherin, clinging desperately to their perceived superiority while sliding into extreme poverty and mental instability, kept the locket as their most treasured family heirloom, even as they sold off almost everything else of value. By the time the 20th century rolled around, the last remnants of the family, including Marvolo and Morfin Gaunt, lived in squalor near Little Hangleton, completely consumed by their violent prejudices and isolation. It was into this wretched environment that a young Tom Riddle stepped, tracing his maternal ancestry and claiming his birthright. Riddle recognized the locket not just as a piece of family jewelry, but as a direct physical link to one of the school's founders. Later, after working at Borgin and Burke's and charming wealthy elderly collectors, Riddle targeted Hepzibah Smith, a descending relative of Helga Hufflepuff who also happened to possess Slytherin's locket. Riddle murdered Smith, pinned the crime on her innocent house elf Hoki, and vanished with both the locket and Hufflepuff's cup. When Riddle converted the locket into a Horcrux, he imbued the heavy gold casing with a fragment of his fractured soul, transforming it from a historical relic into an active engine of psychological torture. Throughout the harrowing months when Harry, Ron, and Hermione wore the locket and turned to keep it safe, the object did not merely sit dormant. It actively defended itself. It created cruel, vivid hallucinations, playing upon Ron Weasley's deepest insecurities of being overshadowed, unloved, and inadequate. The locket projected visions of Harry and Hermione mocking him, weaponizing Slytherin's foundational malice against the trio's friendship. When Ron finally stands before the frozen pool in the Forest of Dean, facing the dark apparition of the locket, He is confronting centuries of pure-blood elitism and psychological warfare. The moment he drives the Sword of Gryffindor through the locket, shattering the beating phantom soul within, he symbolically breaks the generational curse of Slytherin's hatred. Then there is Rowena Ravenclaw's Diadem, a tarnished silver tiara delicately engraved with the chillingly relevant words, "Wit beyond measure is man's greatest treasure," Rowena's own daughter Helena, consumed by bitter jealousy over her mother's unmatched intellect, stole the tiara in the 11th century and fled into the dark forests of Albania. There it sat, lost to history and forgotten by time, until a remarkably charming teenage Tom Riddle manipulated the castle's resident ghost, Helena herself, in her afterlife as the Grey Lady, into revealing its hidden resting place. Riddle retrieved the diadem from its hollow tree, desecrated it with the darkest magic known to wizard kind, and turned it into a Horcrux. It was eventually destroyed in the Room of Requirement during the Battle of Hogwarts, consumed by fiendfire alongside the very room that housed it, its dark soul fragment shrieking into oblivion. The tragic narrative of Rowena Ravenclaw's Diadem highlights the devastating consequences of intellectual vanity and family betrayal. Rowena Ravenclaw was celebrated throughout the magical world for her visionary brilliance, creating a diadem designed to enhance the wisdom and cognitive capacity of whoever wore it. Yet this very symbol of unmatched intellect became the catalyst for a bitter family rupture. Helena Ravenclaw, suffering under the crushing weight of her mother's legendary status and desperate to possess a mind as sharp and revered as Rowena's, stole the tiara and fled to the remote forests of Albania. Rowena, heartbroken and falling gravely ill, concealed the theft from the other founders on her deathbed, asking the bloody Baron, who was deeply in love with Helena, to track her down. When the Baron found Helena in the Albanian woods and killed her in a blind, jealous rage before taking his own life, both mother and daughter were locked in an eternal ghostly loop within Hogwarts Castle. Centuries later, Tom Riddle, who had transformed himself into Lord Voldemort, unlocked this dark secret by seducing the memory of the Grey Lady. Using his disarming charm as a prefect and a model student, Riddle coaxed the tragic tale out of Helena's ghost, learning precisely where the diadem was hidden inside a hollow tree in an Albanian forest. Riddle journeyed there, retrieved the lost artifact, and subjected it to unspeakable dark magic, embedding a fragment of his soul within the tarnished silver tiara. By corrupting the diadem, Voldemort subverted Ravenclaw's philosophy entirely. Instead of an instrument meant to elevate human thought and wisdom, the diadem became an anchor for a mind completely consumed by megalomania and moral decay. During the Battle of Hogwarts, when Harry confronts Vincent Crabbe, Gregory Goyle, and Draco Malfoy in the Room of Requirement, Crabbe unleashes the uncontrollable, ancient dark fire known as Fiendfire. As the monstrous cursed flames consume the towering mountains of hidden clutter within the room, the diadem is engulfed. A single, agonizing shriek of a dying soul echoes from the silver metal before it melts into slag, forever eradicating Ravenclaw's corrupted relic from existence. And finally, we have Helga Hufflepuff's cup, a polished golden chalice featuring two delicate, intricate handles and an engraved badger, associated deeply with ancient culinary and sustenance magic. This was the ultimate physical symbol of Hufflepuff's inclusive, nurturing philosophy, the witch who famously declared, "I'll teach the lot and treat them just the same," passed down through generations until it reached the collector Hepzibah Smith. The cup caught the greedy, acquisitive eye of Tom Riddle. Riddle Poison Smith framed her house elf, stole the chalice, and converted it into a vessel for his increasingly fractured soul, hiding it deep within the high-security vaults of Gringotts Wizarding Bank. Decades later, during the chaotic final assault on the castle, Hermione Granger plunged a basilisk fang straight into the cup, ending its dark existence in a violent burst of liquid malice. To fully appreciate the tragedy of Helga Hufflepuff's cup, we must examine the unique brand of magic associated with its creator. Helga Hufflepuff was a master of food-related charms, domestic magic, and spells connected to sustenance, hospitality, and community building. Her golden chalice was not merely an ornate drinking vessel. It was imbued with enchantments designed to nurture, protect, and unite people, reflecting her belief that the magical community should be an inclusive home for everyone, regardless of their background. Hufflepuff's philosophy directly opposed the exclusionary elitism of Salazar Slytherin, creating a welcoming balance within the original school leadership. For centuries, the cup was carefully preserved by Hufflepuff's descendants, eventually finding its way into the hands of the wealthy and eccentric antiquities collector Hepzibah Smith. Smith treasured the chalice, boasting about its provenance to the young Tom Riddle while he was working at Borgin and Burke's. That encounter sealed Smith's fate. Riddle, obsessed with collecting items of immense historical significance tied to the founders to anchor his soul fragments, murdered Smith with poison, framed her devoted house elf Hoki for the crime, and vanished with both the cup and Slytherin's locket. Seeking a secure location to hide such a priceless and dangerous object, Voldemort entrusted the cup to Bellatrix Lestrange, who placed it deep within her high-security vault inside Gringotts Wizarding Bank, a vault protected by the thief's downfall and a multiplying Gemino curse. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione execute their daring break-in to steal the cup, riding a captive dragon out of the subterranean depths, they rescue the chalice from the dark vault. Later, during the thick of the Battle of Hogwarts, Hermione Granger retrieves the basilisk fang salvaged from the Chamber of Secrets and drives it straight into the golden cup. The chalice reacts violently, releasing a shockwave of dark, phantom liquid that mirrors the agony of the destroyed soul fragment within. In that single act, Hufflepuff's nurturing symbol is forcefully liberated from its dark servitude. Hey, think about the sheer poetic violence of this layout. Voldemort took the foundational philosophy of Hogwarts, represented by the irreplaceable artifacts of its 4 creators, and corrupted 3 of them into personal anchors for his own pathetic immortality. He took Slytherin's elitism, Ravenclaw's intellect, and Hufflepuff's community legacy, and twisted them into dark testaments of his own warped psyche. Only Gryffindor's sword remained pure, acting as the ultimate instrument of their destruction. When you look at the architecture of Voldemort's plan, you see a very methodical subversion of wizarding history. Voldemort didn't pick random objects for his Horcruxes. He deliberately chose items with massive historical weight and psychological power. By targeting the personal relics of the 4 founders of Hogwarts, Voldemort enacted a symbolic conquest over the institution that birthed magical education in Britain. He claimed dominion over Slytherin through direct ancestry and the Locket, Ravenclaw by tracking down her lost diadem in a foreign forest, and Hufflepuff by murdering her descendant and stealing her golden chalice. In doing so, he tried to rewrite the history of the school, making himself the sole heir to its foundational power while turning the sacred objects of the founders into vessels for his fractured soul. Yet this arrogance contained the seeds of his own undoing. By relying so heavily on items tied to Hogwarts, Voldemort ensured the battle lines would be drawn right around the school's history. He ignored the living magic of loyalty, courage, and inclusion that the founders built into the castle stones, which manifested in the bravery of the students, the sentience of the Sorting Hat, and the purity of Godric Gryffindor's sword. Voldemort's fatal flaw was his inability to understand that objects imbued with community, intellect, and chivalry couldn't be fully perverted into permanent instruments of despair. When he focused his ambitions on these historical relics, he created a scavenger hunt that led his enemies straight to his vulnerabilities. By 1998, during the crumbling ruins of the Battle of Hogwarts, those remaining founder relics met their fiery end. The diadem fell to Fiendfire, the cup and the locket fell to the venom-soaked basilisk fang, obliterating them. The heroes destroyed Voldemort's soul anchors and severed the dark generational legacy that had hijacked the school since the 10th century. The founders built a school to teach, divide, and unify. Tom Riddle tried to use those sacred objects to burn it all to the ground. And in the end, the weapons of the founders were used to put him in the dirt. As the dust settles over the scorched stone courtyards of Hogwarts after the battle, the physical absence of these destroyed founder relics marks the end of an era. The diadem is gone, reduced to ash in the flames of Fiendfire. The locket and the cup are broken shells, their dark enchantments shattered forever by basilisk venom and steel. Only the Sword of Gryffindor remains intact, gleaming in the light of dawn, having fulfilled its purpose as an instrument of justice and defense. The destruction of these 3 corrupted relics and the survival of the 4th did more than eliminate Lord Voldemort's magical life support system. It was a cleansing of the school's historical baggage. For nearly 1,000 years, the shadow of the founders' original ideological split hung over every student who walked the corridors of Hogwarts. Slytherin's prejudice, Ravenclaw's perfectionism, Hufflepuff's victimization, and Gryffindor's militarism were all embodied in the physical objects they left behind. When Tom Riddle weaponized those objects, he brought that ancient ideological civil war to its climax. By destroying the Horcruxes, Harry Potter and his companions saved the wizarding world from a tyrant and broke the cycle of historical determinism. They proved that the legacy of the past doesn't have to dictate the future, and that the true spirit of Hogwarts was never locked inside a gold locket, a silver diadem, or a golden chalice. The true magic of the school resided in the choices made by living people in moments of crisis. Choices that healed the fracture of 993 AD and allowed the wizarding world to step forward into an unburdened future.